Hey, I'm ZSH Welcome back to the forest at Bellemont Zoo, where this week we're going to be building a habitat for a pair of the gorgeous Eurasian lynx. We're going to build it right here behind the red deer. Let's go. This is the progress we made last week. We've got the red deer on the left, the wild boar on the right, and here is where we're going to be building for the Eurasian lynx. This habitat is going to be based around a rocky outcrop in the middle of the forest, which is going to allow the lynx to spend time on the ground, up on top of the rocks and up in the trees. And as well as making the rock face as beautiful as possible, we're going to be focusing on realism in this habitat as well. And we're going to start by making a realistic fence that would be required to keep lynx in, that meets all the requirements in the lynx care manual. We need it to be at least 3 meters tall. We need an anti-climb barrier. We need hot wire. And we need mesh small enough that the lynx can't put its paws through it. So the standard steel mesh in the game actually has a really good anti-climb barrier that you can activate, so we're going to base it on that, but the mesh is way too wide and it doesn't have any hot wire or any way of fixing it into the ground to prevent the lynx from digging their way out. So the first thing we're going to do is modify this fence. We've added hot wire using the string piece and some concrete at the bottom using the plaster panels, and now we're going to use some more of the string piece to add extra divisions into the mesh just at the bottom of the habitat where the lynx might be able to get its paws through. And once we've done that, we've got one really solid fence that's going to keep the lynx in. Problem is, it's not the most attractive thing that we've ever built. The challenge for this habitat is going to be surrounding it with this fence and then making it so that the fence can barely be seen. I've copied the pieces we used to customize the fence onto each of the fence panels, so that's the fence done. This is what it looks like from up in the drone cam. And now we can get to work on the more interesting bits. Firstly, we're going to get some more forest in using the forest blueprint that we've used throughout this area. We'll just sink one of them down here. This is going to provide a backdrop to the habitat from the 2 main viewing points that we're going to build, and then we'll get on to the first viewing point. Now, lynx are really shy. They're also very crepuscular, so they're almost entirely active early in the morning and early in the evening. So with the viewing for this habitat, we need to really restrict it so that the lynx aren't going to get stressed out by all the people looking at them, which means we need to be really careful about where we place it to make sure the guests can get the perfect view if they are lucky enough for the lynx to be active when they're in the zoo. The first viewing area is going to be in this building that we're constructing at the moment. We're going to use rustic stone walls and have a bio roof on it as well, so it sits really nicely into the landscape. We're just getting the basics of it done here so we can get the shape and make sure it's pointing in the right direction and fits in nicely with the fences, and then we can start detailing it. The advantage of having the viewing in the building is if the building is unlit, so it's dark inside, and then it's nice and sunny outside where the lynx are, then the viewing for the guest is going to be really good of the lynx. But from the lynx's perspective, as you'll know from real life, if you try and look through a window when it is darker on the inside than it is where you are, you basically can barely see through it, which means the lynx aren't going to be disturbed by the guests in here. And the glass will also reduce the sound of the guests as well. So having blocked it out just with the normal grid pieces, we're now going to replace some of them with panels so we can start getting the proper shape of the build. So we're going to have 2 viewing windows on this side here. And now we've got some panels in, we can start deleting the original walls, and then we can use more panels to get the gap where we're going to have the glass go. So we'll get one on this side, we'll get one on the other side, and then we'll get one in the middle as well. And that will create the basic shape. And then we just need some 1 meter wall pieces at the bottom, and that'll give us the rectangular viewing windows. We'll make them look more interesting later once we start decorating the interior. And with a couple of arches at the front, that's the basic shape done, and we can get the building into the position it's going to go and start editing the barriers to remove some of the fences and get the glass in. We're going to take the fences we've placed down and drag this across so it meets up with the front of the building there. And then we'll go over to the other side and do the same thing to this fence panel here. And once they're roughly lined up at the front, we'll need to align them so that they're going in a straight line through those window ledges there, so that we can then replace it with glass. This enables us to use the habitat glass rather than the glass pieces, which has better visibility. And now the guests will come right up to those viewing windows and look through the glass at the lynx. Now, one of the issues we have in Planet Zoo is that there's no global illumination, so the lighting engine on the inside of buildings doesn't work super realistically like it does in Planet Coaster 2, and what that means is that it's not as dark indoors as it should be. So what we're going to do is place some extra trees in the section of forest that sits in front of this habitat and make sure as little light as possible is going into the viewing area, just so it's as dark as possible in there. Back up in the drone cam, this is where the viewing gallery is going to sit. Let's do some more work on it. We're going to put a floor in just using the Arctic wood pieces. We're going to add some trim using this plaster trim all the way around the bottom of the building to make it look more realistic. And speaking of realism, the hard edges on the rustic stone is not realistic, so we're going to fix that now. We're going to load in the barnyard building kits that we made last year and take the stone wall blueprint from there to start getting a much more irregular edge and a much more three-dimensional shape to this building. It's going to look so much more realistic. I think I made 8 building kits. They're all on the workshop. If you want to search for them on there, just search ZSH Plays. We've got one for pretty much every building theme in the game now, and this barnyard one is the most recent. What we're going to do is drop these along the bottom of the walls and the edges of the walls, and then just delete the bits that we don't need, and we can start using these stones to make the sides of the building just look so much more 3D and realistic. For the rest of the sides of the building, we'll use a load of hosta randomly rotated up the side of it. If we make sure the hosta goes inwards as it gets to the top, it will look like it's climbing up the side of the building. You can see it's already looking way better. We'll do something similar using the variegated ivy on the roof. Just join this up underneath the grass on the wood panel part of it. Again, that's going to break up the outlines, cover up some of the panels, and just make it all sit together really cohesively. And then finally, we'll individually place some faux rocks all the way around these arches here. Again, that super sharp edge just doesn't look realistic. So once we place these around, using random rotation all always works better for rocks, and then sink them in, we can start to break up their edge and get a much more organic look to those archways. We'll copy the rocks from one archway to the other. We want 2 ways in and out of this building just to make sure there's no congestion for the guests, and then we'll move on and start working on the bio roof. Love making these, they always look so nice. We're just going to use a combination of the big blue stem grass and the buffalo grass. Put some of our upside down Nitaria bushes draped over the front, and then fill the rest of it in with some of the various wildflowers that we have in the game. I always forget that the periwinkle has flowers. I only ever use the leaves. And once we've got those in, we'll take a look at it. Looking good. You can see into what will be the habitat there as well. And that roof looks really nice from up here. Let's finish the inside of the viewing gallery. I've put some Arctic wood walls in here just to cover up the stone, but the walls that you actually see will be made from logs. We're going to use the climbing logs from the habitat tab. They're the best logs in the game, I think, and just randomly rotate those along this central part of the building here. They're really going to help with the rustic cabin in the woods look that we're going for here. And then we'll use some slightly shorter ones to fill in the windows as well. We want to make these a bit more interesting so they're not just perfectly square. So we'll have them slightly curved at the top just by changing the height of the logs. And then we'll build a little shelf for people to rest on as they look out the viewing window towards the lynx. Just use some bits of timber for that, and then some of the, I think it's the East Asian wood pieces to join that up to the floor. I've made the shelf slant downwards. I think that's more comfortable for people to lean on. Always see it done that way in zoos. Also gives you somewhere to put some signage. So we'll get some of Lion's signs in. And then one of the things I saw again and again in all the reference photos I was looking at when I was getting inspiration for this building was there's always a bin in there. Now the bin needs to go in the corner, but we don't have any paths there to get the bin onto. So all you need to do is hold down Control, place one random piece of path down exactly where you want it, place the bin on the path, and then you can just delete the path and you've got the bin in the right position. That's the building done. Let's move on to the inside of the habitat and start building the rocks. We're going to build a sort of mini pride rock kind of thing here, like a ledge at the edge of a rocky outcrop that the lynx can stand on. I want to try something a little bit different here. I want some horizontal lines in the rocks, so we're going to mix in some of the conservation walls and then cover those up with the natural rocks and see if we can get a really interesting look. The conservation pieces will be almost completely covered in the rocks, but you'll just see them peeking through here and there. It should be pretty unique. The rock work in here is inspired by a red panda habitat that I saw at Zoo Prague. The rock was kind of striated, I think is the word, so it had these lines running through it, and I really like the look of that. The actual shape of the rocks was nothing like this. It was just a tiny little ledge for the red panda to stand on. This is going to be a lot bigger, but I just wanted to try and capture that look. We're going to mix some mulch and some of the mossy rocks in as well, just to keep things looking interesting. And then we'll add in the ledge with this big rock. This, I think, is my favourite rock in the game. We need to surround it with other smaller rocks so it's not sticking out so obviously, make it look more organic. We want as many spectacular looking things as possible in this habitat to stop the guests from looking at the huge fences that we need to surround it with. And once we've done that and finished off adding in the mulch pieces, we'll take the stacked rocks that we've used throughout this zoo to start joining this on to the rest of the terrain. We're going to end up with one long rock face that runs almost the entire length of the habitat to separate the two levels that the habitat is on. Later on, of course, we'll have trees in there as well so that the lynx have 3 levels that they can access. Very important for lynx habitats and most cat habitats really to have as many different vertical movement opportunities for them as possible. These stacked rocks are made of the temperate rocks, which is great because the rest of it's made from the tiger rocks, and those two complement each other nicely whilst being slightly different. And then any places where it's obvious that it's being copy and pasted, we'll just cover up with a few more tiger rocks, and we'll end up with a really nice looking rock wall. We just need to drop a few more of the conservation pieces in to get those lines, and then a few bits of ivy and other plants to add a little bit of interest. I I really like this ivy plant base. I've been using that a lot recently. We'll put some bracken in as well. This looks really good. The only problem is you always have to sink it down into the ground because the stems disappear when the camera is too far away. And the creosote bushes, which I think are featured in pretty much every habitat in this zoo, they're so good. And then we can move on to the climbing. I want to keep this pretty simple because the cats in this game are not as good at climbing as the monkeys, and if you put too much in, they tend to get confused and start glitching out. Our ocelot is displaying some very strange behaviors at the moment, unfortunately, just because there is so much going on in the ocelot habitat. But I love the look of the habitat too much to replace that. But here I want to keep things simpler. So we got some really simple stuff that we've just made with a few branches, and then I'm going to drop in the climbing that we made for the gibbons a couple of weeks ago, and just take a few pieces of that for visual interest and make sure there's not too much going on so they climb it a bit more naturally. And then we'll put in the enrichment items. So we want enrichment items to basically drag the cats from one side of the habitat to the other. So we're going to have food at one end and then toys and water at the other end, and that'll make sure they're constantly crisscrossing the habitat, using their climbing, getting up onto those rocks where I've hidden one of the blood scent markers. We've got a little shallow pool down at this end of the habitat with some logs that they can climb in and out. Water is another thing that is recommended for lynx habitats, which kind of surprised me. I wouldn't really realise they were into water really, but apparently that is good for their well-being. So we'll get that in there with some more of the stacked rocks. And then we're going to build some little nest boxes for them. Apparently they like to sleep either on or under something, and providing nesting boxes is good. And we're going to have 2 lynx, so we need 2 of these. It's a super simple construction, just a few of the twilight wood panels and then 1 piece of small habitat bedding and it's done. And we can move on to some more realism. So with any dangerous animal, you shouldn't just have 1 door into the habitat, because if that doesn't get locked or if that gets forced open or anything, then you have an escaped dangerous animal. You need 2. So I thought with the focus on realism in this habitat, we'd actually build one of these for a change. It would be bigger than this IRL, but I just wanted something to sort of suggest this. You can't really see it from the guest path. You can see a little bit of it from the guest viewing, which is why I'm going to put it in here. But we've just got a secondary gate in what is effectively a cage, so that should a lynx get through the first door, they're still going to be contained within the habitat, and the keeper will be able to get them back into the habitat before they leave. The door is just made from 2 of the mesh pieces that have that plastic surround, and then we're going to surround that with the smallest mesh pieces so everything fits together nicely, and then finally just put a bit of a door frame in, and we've got a simple little security system. Then we're going to drop one of the massive waterfall pieces into the pond that we built and disguise that so you can just see the water, and we'll put one of the waterfall bottom special effects in to create some ripples across the little pond. And that's the inside of the habitat done. Let's check it out. Looking very nice from the drone cam. There is one more thing we need to do to finish this though, and that is add in the second viewing area. So what we're going to do is surround the entire habitat with these logs. We'll have them all at random heights so it looks nicer, and we're positioning them at a height so that it prevents the guests from being able to see into the habitat, which preserves the privacy of the lynx, but is low enough so that when they're on their ledge, the lynx can see over it, so they've got a 360-degree view of the horizon. In this section of the fence here, we're going to create 2 little peek-throughs for the guests so they can still see the lynx, one at adult height and one at kid height. So we'll just replace the top logs with some of the shortest logs and then move the bottom logs down, and we can start getting some gaps in the fence for the guests to see through. We'll move this one down even lower so that kids can peek through here, and then we'll just put a simple frame in to both of them to make it look cleaner, and that's the habitat done. I like how it still melds into the forest despite those huge fences. Let's get in there and take a look. I really like how the viewing gallery is hidden away amongst the trees, and the lynx are so gorgeous. It's as dark as we can get it in here. Let's take a look at the outside. Yes, the lynx looks so good up on that ledge. They're such beautiful animals. I cannot believe this is the first lynx habitat we've ever built. I've literally never had a lynx in this game in any way description, not even in an episode of Planet Wild. It's definitely worth the wait. Here's the rotary feeder, doing its job of getting them from one side of the habitat to the other. Let's take a look at the whole thing. This forest is turning into one of my favourite ever areas that we've built on the channel, I think. I'm so happy with how it's progressing. And we have one more episode in which we're going to complete it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you want to see next week's episode, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to everyone who's joined the Explorers Club. Hit the join button on the channel if you want to see your name up here, and I'll see you next week for some more Planet Zoo.